Well, good evening, folks. Very sorry for the delay tonight. I actually wanted to get started just a little bit before 12 here because I am getting an absolutely beautiful view of Jupiter. And I'm really, again, apologize for the delay. The weather was just absolutely terrible, but in the last 5-10 minutes or so, the weather has cleared up and you can see a stunning view of the planet Jupiter making its annual closest approach to the Earth that it makes every single year. Now joining us tonight is Brian out in Oak Hill, California, and Brian is very gracious enough to be able to provide us with a view through his telescope as well. And you can see here he has adjusted the exposure just a bit to be able to reveal 3 of the 4 Galilean moons. Now you might be looking at this image and you'd be wondering, wait a minute, isn't there 4 Galilean moons? Where's the 4th moon? And tonight's actually really special because if you look along the limb of the moon in this image, if you look very closely along the right hand side of the limb, you can actually see a hint of a shadow. That shadow is from the moon Io, and it looks like we are beginning to lose the view of Jupiter as it goes behind the clouds. So we can still see Jupiter just a bit there, but we'll be switching to Brian's view. And again, Brian has a view of all 4 of the Galilean moons, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, from left to right, you have the moon Callisto, Europa, and then Ganymede, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll be switching between these 2 views periodically as the weather permits. Obviously, the view through the close-up view is going to be the one that people are going to be most excited to see, but this is just a fantastic view that Brian has of the 4 Galilean moons. So again, just to introduce myself, my name is Kyle again, and this live stream is all about talking to you guys, getting you guys excited about astronomy and the nighttime sky, and learning more about the universe in which we live in. If you're new to the channel, please feel free to like and subscribe, get the word out that this is happening, because it's really fantastic to be able to see more about the universe. And again, if you have any questions or comments about astronomy or the nighttime sky, please feel free to ask them in the comments and I'd be more than happy to answer them. But one thing I really like to do during these live streams is I love to see the huge audience tuning in from across the country. So do me a favor and comment in the chat where you're watching the live stream from, and I will give you a shout out in the live stream as I see your comments go by. Dan says, hey Kyle, I know that Florida weather well. Yes, indeed. If you're thinking of moving to Florida for the weather, for the improved conditions for astronomy, I'll give you some advice. Don't, because the weather is absolutely terrible in the summer. We have Scott tuning in from Atlanta. And we have Phil chatting from San Diego, California. So again, you're looking at a view of Jupiter and its 4 Galilean moons. As I mentioned, the moon Io, is actually in front of Jupiter right now and is producing a transit. As the weather sort of changes tonight, I will be able to switch between my view and this view provided by Brian out in Oak Hill, California, who has very graciously provided stunning views of the moons tonight. We have Mike checking in from McGee, Arizona. Asa checking in from St. Louis. Asa says, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, is asking, so what does it mean when it is in retrograde? And that is a good question. So as the planets go about their orbit around the sun, from our perspective, as we begin to catch up to the planets as they reach opposition, the motion of the planets will begin to reverse, and as we move away, they will move back to the positions, the motions that we're more accustomed to seeing. This retrograde motion is more apparent with the planet Mars, the 4th planet from the sun. But Jupiter and Saturn also do a retrograde motion. So retrograde will only happen as we begin to approach opposition with the Earth. And opposition simply just means Jupiter is making its closest approach to the Earth that it makes every single year. Peter is checking in from Redding, California. We have Tom saying, your friendly chemistry professor from New York City here. We usually only get to see the brightest stars and planets here in the sky. Thank you for your Herculean efforts in presenting this for amateur astronomers to see. Well, thank you so much, and we especially have Brian to thank tonight. He has saved the night. As I mentioned, I had a great view of Jupiter just a moment ago. Unfortunately, the clouds have sort of just prevented it tonight. We have Turbo checking in from Columbus, Ohio. Brian checking in from Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. We have Doug checking in from Yadkinville. Apologize if I mispronounced that. Yadkinville, North Carolina. Joe checking in from Pittsburgh, Kansas. And it's just so fantastic to be able to talk to you guys tonight. So this is our third live stream of the month that we've had. Our first live stream was back a few weeks ago when Saturn came to opposition with the Earth. So if you have a telescope and you're looking for some planets to see, right now is an especially good time to go out and see the planet Saturn. It's just a few weeks past opposition, and tonight's just Jupiter's night to shine. And then after that, we had a live stream for the Perseid meteor shower, and then followed by that of a live stream of Jupiter tonight that you're seeing. And we might be able to switch back to my views just here in a minute. I'm seeing the clouds beginning to relent just a little bit. Let's see if we got... So this is a view through my telescope. This is my 8-inch reflector telescope, and I have a ZWO 224 camera. And you can just see some of the cloud belts that I'm talking about, as well as the moon Io. And you can see these are the clouds I've been telling you guys about. It's been absolutely terrible this summer with just constant clouds. And tonight was actually predicted to be the best night for the weather. So it's just really unfortunate it's worked out this way. But you can definitely see some of the cloud belts, or you could just a minute ago. You can definitely see some of the cloud belts, as well as a hint of the moon Io moving away from the limb of Jupiter. Emma is viewing from Orlando, Florida with the Celestron Next Star Evolution 9.25 inch. Well, that's really cool. I'm very jealous because the weather's a lot better in Orlando than it is here in Tampa. It is absolutely terrible tonight. But we'll be grateful for the views that we can get. So again, this is the best view we've had all night. You're looking at a live view of the planet Jupiter, as well as that bright spot you can see is Io. Just a fantastic view. We have Ethan checking in from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We have Banks asking, so what will happen to Earth? Absolutely nothing. We are perfectly safe and sound from Jupiter tonight. It's just absolutely beautiful in the sky, and it's a fantastic thing to see. And I do apologize if the stream's buffering a little bit. My CPU is getting a little overloaded from the amount of stuff I have open, so I'm just trying to fix that. Ethan wants to know what millimeter lens is that. This is about 1,200 millimeters. So the equivalent magnification is about 600x. Dan wants to know what mount I'm using. I am using a Celestron CGX. GL Reed wants to know, why is Jupiter giving the appearance that it is jumpy? And that is a fantastic question, because the jumpiness you're seeing is actually the Earth's atmosphere sort of causing the image to distort and move around. This is known by astronomers as atmospheric seeing. So the seeing right now is actually pretty good, and you can see tons of cloud belts on the surface of Jupiter. But as maybe a cloud will approach or a thunderstorm, especially tonight, you will be able to see the image begin to shake a bunch. David wants to know, what mount and software are you using? Again, I'm using a Celestron CGX mount, and the software I'm using is SharpCap. Both views tonight are actually being provided by SharpCap. We have Alan checking in from Chicago. And again, it's great to see you guys here, and great to talk to you guys about astronomy in the nighttime sky. It's really our passion here at High Point Scientific, and it's certainly mine. We have Helen checking in from Navarre, Ohio. And you can slowly see Jupiter's beginning to fade as I'm losing it in the clouds again. But you can also see the great red spot a little bit there. Walt. Kenneth asks, which way is Io moving? Will it cause an eclipse? That is a great question, Kenneth. So we just missed the eclipse. I had planned to go live just in time for the eclipse, but unfortunately that just didn't happen with the weather, so we're just missing the tail end of the eclipse. So Io is beginning to move away from the planet Jupiter. But it's super cool to see that in real time as it's happening. Let me see if I can adjust the view a little bit. And we're losing it to the clouds. Not to worry, we have a backup stream set up again by Brian here. Brian is providing us with a fantastic view of Jupiter tonight from Oak Hill, California. And again, from this view, you can see 3 of the 4 Galilean moons. As the stream progresses, you will likely be able to see all 4 of the moons as Io slowly begins to appear on the limb of the moon, or Jupiter, excuse me. Getting my terminologies mixed up tonight. Lots of moons to talk about. We got a question from Tribble1027, and they're asking, are you using a Barlow lens, and will Jupiter's red spot be viewable during your live stream? And the answer to your question is yes, I am using a 3x Barlow lens as well as a 224MC camera. The resulting magnification is about 600 times magnification. So just a few minutes ago, the great red spot was actually visible. However, it was quite small. Many astronomers have noticed that Jupiter's great red spot has actually gotten smaller throughout the years. It used to be much bigger than the Earth, but now it's only about the size of the Earth. So the great red spot is shrinking. Phil wants to know, why do we... I'm sorry about that if I keep cutting out. Again, you know, my software seems to be a little overloaded tonight. Lots of stuff open, but Phil wants to know, why do we not see the rest of the moons, or are they too far out to see them in the frame? That's a good question, Phil. As we mentioned earlier, Io is actually in front of Jupiter right now. You can kind of see it beginning to peek out of the side of Jupiter there, but all four are visible right now. It's just Io is right in front of Jupiter. And if we're lucky, in just a minute, we might be able to see Jupiter through my stream here in a second, too. Scott says the background music keeps playing while your voice cuts out. Interesting. That is interesting. You know, that's really interesting. I'm going to see if I can address that really quickly, so I will be right back, and y'all will have to tell me if I am doing any better. Hey folks, how do you all hear me? I've just switched microphones really quickly. Looks like the battery I was using on my other microphone was actually dying. So that's why my audio kept cutting out. So you should be hearing me loud and proud now. And you're looking at a view through my telescope. And you can just see Io being removed from the limb of the planet Jupiter. So that's super cool to see. I'm always fascinated by Jupiter, and it's so cool to see Jupiter moving in real time like that. And you can see the moons rotating around it. That's just so fascinating to me. You know, it seems like the planets move slow, but they actually don't. And celestial mechanics is actually incredibly fast. It just, from our perspective, it appears to be very, very slow. But it's so cool to see Io whipping around Jupiter like this. And again, there was just a transit a few minutes ago, but unfortunately the stream did start a little bit late, and we were unfortunately unable to see it. Alright, he says, everybody says I'm sounding a lot better. That's good. I will make sure never to use that microphone again. It was a test to see if that microphone provided any clear reviews, but it just did the opposite, it seems. Thank you all again for tuning in, by the way, and dealing with my audio snafus like that. It's been a stressful night getting the stream together, and I'm just grateful that we're seeing the views that we are tonight. We have Ren checking in from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Hello. So again, if you're just tuning in, you're looking at a live view of the planet Jupiter as it makes its annual closest approach to the Earth that it makes every single year. Jupiter can be found in the southeastern horizon, depending on your where you're located on the globe, and is one of the brightest planets in the nighttime sky. The only planet that's out that's brighter is actually the planet Venus, which can be visible in the western horizon. Johnny says, thanks for the stream, but I need to head out. Well, Johnny, appreciate you tuning in. It's so grateful to be able to talk to you guys tonight. And everybody seems to be saying that the audio sounds much better, so I will keep that in mind. Never use that microphone again. We have Michelle checking in from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Don checking in from Frisco, Texas. Hello, everybody. And again, I apologize for starting the stream late like I did, but the weather just was not cooperating tonight. We have Hassan checking in from Erie, Pennsylvania. They're watching Jupiter live with their scope. That sounds fantastic. I guess you get double view of Jupiter. I'm actually curious, if you're looking at Jupiter through your telescope right now, can you describe the view and how does it compare to the live stream? Daryl checking in from Willis Wharf, Virginia. I apologize if I mispronounced that. They're saying it's cloudy there. It seems to be the theme of the night. Russ wants to know, is this from a Schmidt-Cassegrain grain? This is actually from a 8-inch reflector. The other view that's being provided through us with Brian, which we're probably going to switch to in a second as the clouds begin to encroach on Jupiter, is through a Schmidt-Cassegrain grain. I believe it's an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain grain. Scott is asking, you mentioned that you're using some type of software. What does it do? So the software I'm using is called SharpCap Pro. And what it does, it will record video for you. And the idea being is when you're doing astrophotography, you want to stack as many frames as possible, and you want to get those frames as fast as possible. So I use a camera called a 224MC, ZWO 224MC, and what I do is I'll stack the frames together about 300 or 400 and sharpen them, and by stacking them I reduce the noise and increase the signal, and then when I sharpen it I get a much clearer view. So I will be doing that tonight, and I will be able to provide you guys with a much more clear view. We have Bill checking in from New Jersey. Hello Bill, and welcome to the stream. Doug says, thank you for the great views of Jupiter. I've got to go to bed. Well, Doug, thank you for hanging on tonight. Johnny wants to know, how fast is Jupiter rotating? Well, Johnny, I don't have the exact figure off the top of my head, but Jupiter rotates very fast. Its rotational period is only about 11 hours. So when you think about it, the Earth's is 24 hours, and the Earth is a much smaller body than Jupiter. So the speed at Jupiter is rotating is pretty tremendous. In fact, if you look closely, you'll be able to see that Jupiter isn't a perfect sphere. It actually bulges at the equator. This is a result of that spin that I was talking about. Russ wants to know, is it sharpened in Registax? Yes, I do. And again, you're looking at a live view of Jupiter, and you can see, pretty incredible actually, you can see Io beginning to move away from Jupiter. Now, Io is a really fascinating moon. For those who aren't aware, Io is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. And the reason for that is because Jupiter's immense gravity sort of tugs and pulls on Io. And as it tugs and pulls, it stretches the inner core, and magma comes up through those cracks and crevices that are as a result of those gravitational interactions, and it just tons of volcanoes on Io. It is an absolutely fascinating world. Ren says they have a Nexstar 5 SE coming in December, and they ask, will my view of Jupiter be this good? That's a good question, and maybe? Probably not quite this good, because this aperture is quite a lot bigger, and aperture is king in astronomy, so this view will be a little better, but fret not, the view will still be fantastic, and we're losing Jupiter, so we're going to switch over to Brian's view. Brian, again, is graciously providing us some of his time tonight, and you can see a view of all 4 of the Galilean moons now. As I mentioned, Io is slowly making itself known as it transited the face of Jupiter tonight. So cool to see such a display of celestial mechanics in motion. Now, Jupiter's moons are absolutely fascinating to me, and the reason for that is each of the moons have such a unique story. We think about moons in the solar system, we think about moons like the Earth's moon, sort of gray and drab, albeit interesting, not especially remarkable. Jupiter's moons are all unique and interesting, at least the 4 major Galilean moons. They're called the Galilean moons as they were named after the astronomer Galileo Galilei, who first observed the moons of Jupiter through his small telescope back in the 1600s. We mentioned Io and its tidal heating that stretches and pulls Io, but next to Io, off the closest moon to Io that you can see in this image is Europa, and Europa is also experiencing tidal heating, but not quite as much. Europa actually has a thick layer of ice, and underneath that ice, it is thought that there might actually be liquid water underneath the surface of all that ice. Now that ice is very, very thick. NASA is actually hoping to send a probe in a few years called the Europa Clipper probe, and the expectation is that we'll be able to get a better look at that ocean and see what its composition is. It's probably a very cold ocean, so it probably has a lot of salt, so it might not be the best for life if I had to guess, but wouldn't it be fascinating to think that if Europa has life, if two places in the solar system could evolve life, how many life forms must there be out in the cosmos? Next to Europa, you can see the moon Callisto. Callisto is an absolutely massive moon. It is bigger than Mercury, and it is the most heavily cratered body in the solar system. And the moon that's on your very, very far right there is the moon Ganymede, the single largest moon in the solar system. We have Michael. They're saying, hello from Terre Haute, Indiana. I have a question if you don't mind. What exactly can you see with the first scope? Are those just used for viewing the moon, or can you see nebula, star clusters, and planets as well? What he's talking about is the Celestron first scope. I believe that is a 76mm reflector telescope, and you can see the moon, the rings of Saturn, the moons of Jupiter, as well as some brighter nebula such as the Orion Nebula, depending on the light pollution. And we might be able to go back to my view in a second. So again, we're looking at Jupiter as it's sort of passing through the clouds here, and just as quickly as she came, she left. Well, folks, I'm going to step away for just a minute to refill my glass of water. But again, you're looking at a live view of Jupiter and its 4 Galilean moons as it makes its closest approach to the Earth that it makes every single year. Hey folks, Kyle back here again, and once again you're looking at a live view of the planet Jupiter. I saw a couple questions roll through. One I wanted to hit really quick was what equipment I am using. I am using a 224 MC camera from ZWO, a 8-inch f6 reflector telescope, a Celestron CGX mount to track it, and I am using SharpCap to capture the actual image. So I hope that clears it up, and I apologize if that was not clear earlier. I know my audio was a little wobbly earlier on, but I think we have that problem fixed now. And here's a view through my telescope, and you can see a beautiful view of Jupiter and its beautiful cloud belts. And if you're looking at this image, and we talked about it earlier, but if you look at this image and you notice how Jupiter is shaking and it's wobbling, and that's because the Earth's atmosphere is not static, it's fluid. It moves with respect to time. And because of that, when we look through the atmosphere at higher magnifications, more of those movements are amplified. So when we're looking at Jupiter, we're looking at all of the inherent turbulence in the Earth's atmosphere. Tonight's actually relatively steady, at least here in Florida, considering how terrible the weather is this evening. But you can see a clear view of the cloud belts and what I believe to be Jupiter's Great Red Spot in the middle of the field of view there. Daryl has a 224 MC coming on Monday. You're going to absolutely love it. I can promise you that. It is a fantastic camera. We have a question from Helen, and Helen wants to know, I am very new to enjoying this hobby and learning. I purchased my first two telescopes. The first is a Dobsonian 12-inch. So far we have enjoyed Saturn and Jupiter, and I've had amazing moon shots with just cell phones with an adapter. But Helen will want to know, what else can you view with it? Well, Helen, that's a fantastic question. You can view the nebulas, such as the Orion Nebula, the Andromeda Galaxy, the so many galaxies. What I encourage you to do is download an app on your phone, like Stellarium. I believe Sky Safari is the one I use for my iPhone. But you also can download a web app like Stellarium and look through that catalog and see what different planets and what different nebula are out for any given night. We have a question from John, and John wants to know, are there any videos of Earth taken by some satellites traveling throughout our universe, taking videos of our Earth rotation and revolving around our sun in real speed? Let me try to understand your question. So you're asking if there are any videos of Earth taken by a satellite traveling through our universe. Yes and no. If you mean like a satellite beyond Earth orbit, like maybe at a Lagrange point or something similar, no video per se, because Earth's motion from that perspective would be relatively slow. As to my knowledge, no. But I'm fairly confident something like that might exist out there. I just haven't seen it firsthand. It's a good question, though. We have a question coming in from Johnny on YouTube, and Johnny wants to know what's the highest light pollution you can be in and still see a nebula. That's a fantastic question. From my experience, I have seen the Orion Nebula through a pair of binoculars from the middle of Tampa. So the Orion Nebula M31 is probably the best one. Or excuse me, M42. If I said M31, I apologize. It's getting a little late for me. We have Meryl checking in from San Jose, California. We have a question from Oda, and they're asking, are you using any filters? Yes, I am using a UV IR cut filter.
the sky. And so when they line up exactly right, you'll still see the sun kind of peeking around the edge of the moon.
Good deal. Good deal. So yeah, we can see more of the moon being sort of bitten away by the shadow of the Earth there. The eclipse has already begun. It's been gone underway for about 15 minutes or so now. So we're about around 80 minutes until totality, give or take a little bit. I was kind of rough with my estimate there on the time. But this is so exciting to see. You know, I've seen several solar eclipses. I've seen several lunar eclipses, and each one's unique and each one's really exciting to see. You know, I watched the last lunar eclipse in January 2019, and that was actually visible here in Florida, and it was just so cool to see the moon just slowly just sort of ebb away, and then just the beautiful red of the moon. A question I hear a lot is, why is the moon red during a lunar eclipse? You may have addressed this a little bit, Scott, but could you address it again? Why does the moon turn red during a lunar eclipse?
Yeah, so that's a very, very good question. You probably heard about, the blood moon. That's what they keep calling it on the news and stuff, because the moon does turn a really dark shade of red, and that's because the only light that's reaching the moon is passing through the Earth's atmosphere. And if you've ever, seen a sunrise or a sunset where all the clouds turn these beautiful colors, orange and red and pink, we get those colors because the sun's light is coming
Hey
through
folks,
the
Kyle here
Earth's
again, and once again you're looking at a live view of the planet Jupiter making its annual close approach to the Earth that it makes every single year. This view is coming to you through my 8-inch f6 reflector telescope. As you can see, the view is slowly being obscured by clouds. So once again, we have our backup camera to help us out. And this is super cool again because you can see how Io has just reappeared away from the limb of the planet Jupiter. So this is really fantastic to see.
passing through the Earth's atmosphere and then keeps going out towards the moon. And by the time it gets to the moon, only the red light from the sun is left over, and so it turns the moon this blood red color.
And I will tell you from personal experience, it's just such a eerie thing to see in the sky. The moon just
Tom says, I think your audio is very distant. That's because I muted my mic for a couple minutes there.
that would otherwise rendered invisible by the
So
light
you
of the
should
moon.
not have been hearing me.
And just being able to see this ghostly moon in the sky is such an eerie feeling. We're slowly getting that view back from Scott down in Costa Mesa,
Yep.
California, and we can see here a more magnified view of the moon.
John wants to know, is it possible for one or both of them Voyager satellites to be turned around directly towards our Earth and videotape recording of Earth traveling around the sun in real time speed? So we do have a satellite that actually, and this was pointed out to me by the way, we do have a satellite that is orbiting the Earth at a very distant orbit away from the Earth at what's called a Lagrange point, and I totally forgot about this. And that actually does record pictures and delivers pictures to the Earth every so often. To answer your question about Voyager, not really, because you have to understand Voyager 1 and 2 are outside of our solar system. And because they're outside of our solar system, we can barely even detect their signal. Now, when you consider, take my stream as an example, how difficult it is to transmit video from one point to another. Now consider that difficulty out to beyond the orbit of Neptune. That just becomes exponentially more challenging, so it's just not possible to get video. There is a video from Galileo, the Galileo spacecraft when it left the Earth after being launched by a space shuttle. And as I recall correctly, it does have a video, sort of a time lapse of the Earth receding away with the moon sort of going around it. So I suggest doing a quick YouTube of that video to see what I'm talking about.
The totality will only last for about 13 minutes or so. This is not a full central lunar eclipse where the moon passes directly in the center of the Earth's shadow. It's sort of off to the edge a little bit. Because of that, the moon will...
All sorts of audio snafus tonight. Yeah, I see what happens. It's just the video I was using ended and autoplay went on to the next one for the music. So I apologize for that again. totally just didn't notice that till now. So that should be fixed. Streaming is very complicated, and anybody who's streamed can understand this, especially when you start doing things like adding different viewpoints, and you know, it's a lot to ask for your computer anyways. So I see what you guys are talking about, and I have fixed that. So, but we do have my view back again, I think, so we can just share that. And folks, we'll probably be wrapping up here in about 5 minutes or so. It is getting pretty late for me, and I have a really heavy telescope to bring inside, as well as, you know, an ideal goal of at least 6 hours of sleep tonight. But I'm an astronomer. What is sleep? And there she goes again. Jen wants to know, do you have a favorite planet or space object to look at? Well, my favorite planet is definitely going to be Mars. I love looking at Mars simply because, you know, you get to see Jupiter every year, pretty much throughout at least half the year, but Mars is really only visible through a telescope where you can actually see detail like once every 2 years. So just the scarcity of seeing it. Plus, Mars is my favorite planet. I'm a huge concept of the idea of going to Mars and terraforming Mars. I'm a huge fan of that. And just seeing Mars through a telescope is one of the most inspiring things. Bill says, thanks, Kyle. This has been fun. Well, thank you for tuning in. Jen says, Mars is full of possibilities, and I absolutely agree. Russ wants to know, do you also shoot DSOs? DSO standing for Deep Sky Objects. And yes, I do. As a matter of fact, our monthly new moon live streams, when the weather's good, I actually will show you guys what my setup is. Generally speaking, I like to use something really wide field, so I like to actually use a Samyang 135mm lens for my wide field astrophotography, and that works out pretty well. So I connect that with a program called Nina, and Nina is a fantastic resource. It's completely free for any astrophotographer to use. Would highly recommend it. Works with any Celestron or Skywatcher or any sort of mount or camera. It's a fantastic resource. I would strongly recommend it for your astrophotography. So yes, I do shoot deep sky objects. It's probably my main squeeze, as it were. David coming in saying, streaming is complicated. Lots to keep track of. I agree, and especially when it's 1 in the morning. I remember for the lunar eclipse live stream we had a couple months ago, I remember it being 8 or 9 in the morning, and I didn't really have much sleep. And I just remember how hard it was just to be able to communicate basic concepts like what a lunar eclipse was. So things get a little tricky when you're streaming and tired. Linda wants to know, how many days will this be in the sky for us to see? It's going to be in the sky for quite a few months, but tonight's the brightest it's going to get. Opposition means 180 degrees away from the sun relative to us, so whenever the sun sets, Jupiter rises. And again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to each and every one of you. I love being able to share these views of the nighttime sky, and I hope in some way it inspires you to be able to look up more. It's one of my great passions to be able to share these views with you, like I said, and just talking to all of you, hearing your stories, hearing what you use for astrophotography, seeing what astronomy means to you. It means so much to us, and it means so much to me personally. So I just want to, again, thank you guys for tuning in. Our next live stream is going to be for the next new moon, sometime in September. We're going to be live streaming once or twice every month. We're hoping to increase the frequency of live streams and slowly make improvements on live streams. Again, you know, live streaming is difficult, so a few technical snafus there, here and there, as you can probably understand. But at this point, I am going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you guys so much for staying with us tonight. I again apologize for how late the stream ended up being. The weather just was not in our favor tonight here in Florida. But I want to again thanks Brian for his help tonight and providing these stunning views of the planet Jupiter as well as its 4 Galilean moons. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And always remember to keep looking up. Thank you, guys.